Well said.
Is Purdue number one on your list?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
First of all, they're, just sitting there with one loss. And nobody else is. In terms of teams you would consider national title contenders.
Sure. You don't consider Florida Atlantic out of Conference USA a national title contender?
I mean, hey, just get in there, get into March. Anything can happen, baby. The first thing is, unlike Purdue teams of the past, this defense is really, really good. More than good enough to actually meet the qualifications, which we've been screaming about with Purdue for years, specifically last season. And, well, I don't love the makeup of this roster in terms of, and I'm curious how you're going to handle this part of it, in terms of how it's constructed and the way I want my national title and the way I want my team constructed and the way national championship teams usually are constructed. Zach Edey is just so tall and so good, and I have enough faith in the guards that I'm not too worried about it. I feel pretty comfortable. I feel like Edey is different than it being Oscar Tshiebwe because of his passing, because of the way that he just completely changes the way you have to game plan, or he just eats you alive because he hits, hook shot after hook shot, because there is nobody who can guard him because he's 7'4". And you have somebody who's running the offense that Matt Painter trusts, that I trust, that you trust, as if our opinions matter every bit as much as Matt Painter's.
You're damn right they do.
But this idea of, even if I would love to not be so reliant on two freshman guards, the freshman guards have been awfully good, and they put their teammates in good positions, and they shoot the ball well. So I'm with you that I don't have worries about past NCAA tournament performances for Purdue. My worry was always they are just not built from an analytical standpoint, from what they do well and what they don't, to win a national championship. This team is.
I got a couple things. One, Zach Edey, we're beating around the bush here. Zach Edey's the best basketball player in the country.
Yeah, that too.
That's something that Purdue has never had.
Yep.
I mean, maybe you could have made a conversation for Carson Edwards. But that's a team that with 3 seconds left, the ball was on the other end of the court, and Purdue was going to the Final Four. Right? That's how close Purdue came to a Final Four the last time that Purdue had an argument for the best player in the country.
I know. I mean, that was a game against the national champions.
Right.
Saying they were that close to the Final Four might even be a disservice.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, they might have been that close to a national championship for all we know.
Right.
And that Purdue team was 34th at KenPom defensively. They're 17th right now. They finished 4th in offense. Where's Purdue offensively right now?
3?
4th.
4th.
They're 4th. So that's number one. You know what I like my college basketball teams having? The best player in college basketball. I like my college basketball teams having that. That's one. Two, there's plenty of talk about would you love for the best player in college basketball to be like a 6'6" perimeter guy? Sure. But I'm just not sure there's a team in the country I have more faith in getting a good shot when they absolutely have to have it than Purdue.
Yep.
Because your options are, and the other part of this is that Purdue's 233rd in the country in 3-point field goal percentage. That's crazy. Do you consider Purdue a sub 200 3-point shooting team?
No, and historically I feel like they've always been top 50.
Right. And Matt Painter believes that too. And the makeup of that roster suggests that's true. Right. Now they don't right. Their style is not taking a bunch of 3-pointers because Zach Edey is the best player on their team. So why would it be?
Yeah.
But your options when, and I go back to the play they ran at the end of the Michigan State game that we talked about, not we, in the post game press conference, Matt Painter said, I mean, we went to Zach Edey because he's Zach Edey. And Michigan State decided that they were going to let that guy shoot 30 times and not double him and force him to score enough to win the basketball game. And they stuck with that on the final possession. So your options against Purdue on defense are either you double and triple team the 7-4 guy who Matt Painter can't say enough about his decision-making and passing when those things happen, or you can let your poor big guy who's drawn the assignment to go one-on-one with the 7-4 guy that's averaging, I don't even know what he's averaging. I don't know the averages off the top of my head, but it's like 24 and 13. Like it's absolutely preposterous. I'm gonna look it up here as I'm talking. But like that is a unbelievably solid foundation to start with. And normally I'm like, and it's different than Drew Timme. It just is, because he's 7'4", right, and he doesn't get into foul trouble, and he can play 33 minutes a game. Like, it's not like he's a 7'4" guy that has no stamina. Matt Painter's huge on that as well. 21 and a half and 13 with two and a half blocks a game. Anyways, and averaging 1.5 personal fouls per game, by the way. He's never in foul trouble.
Wow.
Never in foul trouble.
Yeah.
So I like all of the, and he shoots 75% from the free throw line, by the way. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of this as well. There aren't very many teams, if any, that I am more confident in the foundation of their offense than Purdue's, because they have guys that can shoot around them. Braden Smith makes a lot of really good decisions with the basketball in his hands. And Fletcher Lawyer, that dude's a dog. That dude wants the ball when the lights are brightest, right? I mean, he's a freshman who will go on the road and have a crappy first half and then go off in the second half. How many freshmen ever have done that?
Yeah.
If anything, they get a couple of good looks early in the game and they start to go downhill after that as the game gets tougher. Fletcher Lawyer is the other way around. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, Matt Painter is the best coach in the country for my money. If I wanted to start a program right now, Matt Painter is the coach that I would pick to run that basketball program. They have the best player in the country, and they have good guard play, and more importantly, guards that want the ball when it comes down to it. And they're 19-1. And they, no matter how ugly it gets in the second half, and no matter how, that there is not a Purdue team that finds ways to win basketball games the way that this one does. Because at some point, even if some of the wins are ugly, they keep finding ways to win basketball games. And at some point that has to matter, even if sometimes the wins are ugly, and they have the kind of second halves they had against Maryland. But I'm all in. I think that people coming up with quote unquote glaring holes that Purdue has are trying too hard. I just think that they are. They've got the best player in the country, and for my money, the best coach in the country, and that's good enough for me.
And it also goes to the looking at everybody else, right?
Right. That too.
And the teams that we laid out, okay, a couple of them got into Final Fours. You have Kansas on that list. All I know is I'm taking Purdue 99 times out of 100 if those two teams play.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kansas doesn't have any size. And that's assuming Kansas actually gets, all of the issues they're dealing with right now figured out. Alabama also hasn't been there. I mean, some NCAA tournament success. Nate Oates has had NCAA tournament success generally.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's, winning 3-4 games, not 6. There just isn't anybody that scares me. So all of that being equal, yeah, I'll take the 7'4" behemoth coached by Matt Painter, who's on what's been arguably, if not definitively, the most consistent team in the country.
Mm-hmm. I just don't need it to be that much more difficult. For what it's worth, the team that I'd be most concerned with is Alabama. I think Ethan Morton is. I think Ethan Morton is the epitome of a college basketball player that has just found his niche on a really good basketball team.
He's the next Purdue guy.
He's the like and he's capable of guarding the best player on the other team. Has shown it all year. I would be a little bit concerned about who in the world guards Brandon Miller.
Yep.
I mean,
when Alabama has an answer to that question of Zach Edey. Now, whether it works or not is a different conversation. But again, Bediako is the kind of guy you can leave one-on-one.
In theory.
Yeah, in theory. And at least give it a shot.
Right. At least they have the answer to that question.
Yes.
And most teams are just like, we don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And so that would be the team that would scare me the most. But,
agreed. Yep.
But like still it doesn't scare me enough to put Alabama at the top of this list. But and I just like I love and for what it's worth, I'm such a big fan of the way that Matt Painter runs his program in 2023 when nobody else is running their program that way. It's so refreshing, and I'm not here to talk about NIL, and I'm not here to talk about, because I'm sure like behind closed doors, Matt Painter would like for Purdue's NIL program to be a little bit stronger than it is. Like that wouldn't surprise me, but he's consistent about how he doesn't give a darn about rankings. I mean, and he's proven it with the two guys that he went and got and are the second and third most important players on his basketball team. For the number one in the AP poll this week, basketball team, by the way.
And look at Zach Edey too.
Right. Exactly. I find it super refreshing. And that doesn't really matter for this conversation, but for me, it leaks into every conversation I have about sports. It just does. And this is no exception. So I enjoy Purdue being a national title contender. I think it's really fun. When everybody else on this list, maybe not everybody else on this list, but because UCLA has a team built by a lot of guys that have been there for a while, but they also have some 5-star freshmen. Yep. And
same with
Purdue
Houston.
Doesn't have that, and same with Houston.
Right. High level freshmen, veterans. Yep.
Right. And Purdue's turned their quality freshmen, but not their tippity top of the iceberg in terms of recruiting freshmen, into some of the most consistent and most reliable freshmen in the country. And that's just cool. So I'm here for that as well.
Imagine if they would have landed Tyrese Hunter on top of all this.
I know, right? I'm almost like is in hindsight 2020, do you kind of have to be glad they didn't?
It's a very interesting conversation. Yeah.
Sure.
How would that have impacted development? Would it have impacted development?
Right.
Would it have just been a more expansive rotation where it really, maybe Fletcher Warrior
like a three-headed monster kind of
right,
thing.
Where they don't get as many minutes, but it's fine, and you got one of the best defensive guards in the country. It is. Yeah. It's a fascinating conversation though, because they were in that list. I remember talking to my friend who's a Purdue fan. I texted him. I said, the only team in the vicinity of where Tyrese Hunter is from that is on his list is Purdue. I don't know if that means anything, but it's at least an interesting reason to be optimistic. And of course, he went from Wisconsin, where he's from, to Texas instead. But and NIL certainly had a lot to do with that, I would think. It is kind of interesting to think about how good they, and again, yeah, maybe it's all for the best, that this is the best version Purdue could have had, even if Tyrese Hunter was wanting to go there. We'll never know the answer to that. It's just fascinating to think about. They could have had that guy too, potentially. For sure. Number one in the AP poll, number one on both of our lists. And in very Jays for Days podcast fashion, we have basically the exact same list, but that's okay. If you've been around the podcast, you know that that's a pretty common occurrence around these parts. You got anything else?